Hello. Thank you guys for having me here. It's still kind of early. I'm here based off in Houston, Texas. So it's still kind of early here. But let's go right into it. Sorry, the noise. My AC just decided to kick on just now for some reason. But so basically, this is how NASA does sound. And what a lot of people think of, they're like, why would NASA need an audio engineer? It's actually quite simple once you really think about it. There's NASA TV, and then you have uh, NASA YouTube channel, NASA's Facebook Live. All that has the audio where you can watch the live spacewalk so you can hear them talking. There's someone that sits behind a board, who is me, and they pushes the audio up. So let's get started so I don't run out of time here. All right, so this is the console that I use for mixing live broadcast audio. It's a Euphonics S5. It's about 24, 25 years old right now. It's a dinosaur. As you can see, some of the screens are kind of fading out there. But it is an absolute workhorse, and it is an amazing console. Every once in a while, we have to do a hard reboot and not restart the console, but we can't do it as often as many other broadcast centers would restart their console, because our console is considered backstage support for mission control. So if their audio for some reason goes down, that's coming from the space station, my console, as you would look over on the left-hand side of your screen, that is the backup audio for the audio that comes from the space station down to the ground. So if anything happens in mission control, they can then get that audio from my console. So we have to actually schedule whenever we're going to do shutdowns. Yes, that is an Emmy back there. I named her Amelia. I'll get more into how I received that Emmy. Right here, this is our patch base. So it's a digital analog type of system. I mean, NASA still has hardwired cables that travel under the ocean bed that goes all the way from Houston, where I'm at, to Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where they actually launched the rockets, which is really interesting. So we do a digital slash analog hybrid type of mix when it comes to audio things. And back here, this is where you can see our Pro Tools Workstation is set up. That's for more of recording things. You can see our telephone hybrids that we have and our phone bank. So when we do events where the media wants to call in and listen to a conference, they'll call into one of these phone banks, which sits inside my audio control room, which is what my name is on console, actually. I'm considered Houston ACR, which is the Houston Audio Control Room. If you notice, whenever you look at Mission Control, you'll see that each one of the people that speak inside Mission Control have their own names. You have Capcom, which is the person who communicates with the space station, since you don't want all of those people speaking at one time. And you have Flight Director, and you'll see PAO, which is Public Affairs Office. But for me, in the back room, ours is considered Houston ACR. So whenever we go to speak to Flight or speaking to the space station, we let them know that they are talking to us in the Houston Audio Control Room. And over here, you can see our very, very mini delay systems that we use. So the audio that comes down from the space station, whenever you're using HD feed with their handheld mic, comes down at about 2.5 milliseconds per turnaround of delay, which is actually not terrible when you think about it having to travel from at least 250 miles above the Earth. So what 2.5 seconds delay, just making sure everything's up with lip sync, that's the amount of time. And the interesting thing about when that audio comes down is that, you have these astronauts who are really, really smart people, but a lot of times they forget to turn off their handheld microphone whenever they're speaking with clients down on Earth, or the media or schools down on Earth and doing presentations on NASA TV. So we have to constantly remind them and train them to make sure they cut off their handheld microphone when they're not done speaking, because unlike me, who has headphones in my ear, they don't have headphones up there. So they'll be listening to the speaker. And if they keep their microphone on, then it'll cause this loop of just delay and echo, and just keeps going on and on and on and circle. And it makes for very terrible TV, and it's quite annoying. So we try to train them on the ground to make sure that they cut off their microphone after they're done speaking, and then don't cut it back on to whether they're ready to answer the question, which you would think would be very easy for an astronaut who's very smart, but sometimes they get into the mode of talking and they just forget to cut their microphone off. Here is the microphone that I actually use to talk to the space station. So after every event that we do live with the space station that goes on TV, I close out the event and let them know that the event is over with. And then Capcom will come on and tell them you can go back and set up to your nominal standings. So the line that I say, it's very simple. It's station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the event. And if you watch anything on NASA TV, a lot of times if you watch those events, you'll hear either me or two of my other colleagues saying that. That's just letting the space station know that the event is over with and they can get ready to deconfigure and there's no more questions for them. If you notice that this microphone is an SM58, right, and it has a dent in it, is a very funny story about how that dent got in there dealing with me. And that was my very first time doing a live event with NASA. I've been there for about four and a half years now. But my very first time doing an event with them, I was super, super nervous about having to talk on not only live TV, but to astronauts in space all at the same time. And my hands were shaking, my hands were sweating, and I literally dropped the microphone while we were live on air, and the fader was pulled up, and you heard like this big donk, and then I heard and said my line, and I pulled the fader down. It caused me great embarrassment. My supervisors and coworkers have finally let me live that down. Although I did have an astronaut tell me that was probably the greatest mic drop heard around the galaxy, which I will gladly take that compliment. But I like keeping that microphone. It still works perfectly fine, and it's a great reminder to humble myself after working with all these amazing people. Sometimes you can't get the big head. So the types of live events that we do, this one that we do here is what you say it looks is a news conference or an EVA briefing. We do events like this whenever there's getting ready to say a spacewalk is coming up, or we have a new set of astronauts that's getting ready to launch upon the space station. They'll come and they'll speak in one of our conference rooms. Well, my job is this one is being an A2. An A2 is basically the person who sits inside, is the audio engineer who's inside the room. I'm not mixing the live sound that's going out to TV, but I'm making sure that the talent is all mic'd up. Everyone's there on time. I act as the mic wrangler for the people who have questions, the media or anyone in the audience who has questions. I make sure that the audio in the room sounds fine, and I usually wear a headset to where I can communicate with the A1, the lead audio engineer, who's actually mixing out to TV. So it's basically a second audio engineer just for the people who are in the room. Here's another event, a live event that I did. It's with astronaut Peggy Woodson talking with singer Katy Perry. This was right before the MTV Music Awards, and Katy Perry was the host, and she wanted to interview Peggy Woodson, and they used this in the clip of one of the MTV Awards. So this is the types of events that we do where they do interviews for MTV Awards, or as you see here, if you look closely in the screen, that's me mixing Brad Pitt, who was asking an astronaut questions about the new role of the movie that he was doing. And so when you see movies like this, a lot of times if there's a movie that's dealing with NASA, you can see that they're actually using NASA's emblem and their logo in it. Then a lot of times they work closely with NASA to come up with not only the science, but to get into the head of astronauts that they're going to be portraying. And so this is a clip, a picture of one of the events where Brad Pitt was asking an astronaut live in space better ways for him to portray an astronaut in the movie. This one right here is actually probably one of my favorite moments working at NASA. You have the country artist singer Garth Brooks was performing and playing live up to the space station on and live up to TV music for them. So Garth Brooks is really, really big fan of NASA and space and astronauts. And so he came to do a tour of the mission control, and I was tasked with holding a shotgun microphone and making sure that the audio from his guitar was going up to the space station. One of the astronauts up there at the time, I believe his name was Jack Fisher, was a really, really big fan of Garth Brooks and actually used one of Garth Brooks' song as their launch song. So each astronaut can pick a song that they want to hear as they're sitting in the rocket before they launch off to space. And this particular astronaut picked the Garth Brooks song. So Garth Brooks thought it'd be a great idea for him to come by and visit him and his wife. and he played the song in Mission Control, which was really nice because I come from a music background. So to mix music with space and NASA all into one was a lovely blend for me. Here's another event. If you notice, there's a giant pool standing back there, and that pool back there is what we call the NBL, the Nutriency Buoyancy Lab. So what it is basically where the astronauts go to train underwater for their spacewalks. That pool is the size of a NFL football pool, so American football field. And so what they do is have a actual replica of the International Space Station underwater so the astronauts can train down there. And from this particular thing that I was doing, you have two astronauts there that were talking on Facebook Live. So I was putting the audio up to Facebook Live for them as they were inside at the NBL describing what they do. So that's just, I do live events sometimes in the studio, sometimes inside the audio control room, or I may be doing live events from like our NBL or different places like that. This was a very interesting event here. As you can see, we kind of have like a little rig up for an Instagram live event where we had Will Smith, the actor Will Smith, was talking to an astronaut in space. But if you realize and recognize how Instagram Live works, you have to use a cell phone in order for Instagram Live to work correctly. But the interesting thing about that is that Instagram Live and astronauts do not have cell phones up in space. So they had to use, basically, they use their normal camera and handheld microphone that they're talking to. And we had Will Smith on a phone that he was going to use for Instagram Live. And so what we did was took my personal phone that you see there. We kind of took like a microphone stand and like a phone rig and hooked it up. And so we put his video with, put our phone in front of the TV so that way you could see the astronaut on Instagram Live, and use a speaker, like a normal computer speaker, as the audio source for Instagram Live, which is interesting because the astronaut was actually hearing telephone audio and not the Instagram Live audio, because I had Will Smith on its telephone, and Will Smith was hearing the astronaut's audio back through that telephone line and not through Instagram Live. Instagram Live was just used as the medium for everyone else to see, but they were actually speaking to each other through phones. But it worked out lovely. It was very interesting to do. And it is considered the very first ever Instagram Live from space. So I was extremely happy to be working through events like that. I also do the podcast for NASA Johnson Space Center. So I record the audio for the podcast. It's called Houston, We Have a Podcast. A lovely name, by the way. You should subscribe. We're on SoundCloud and iTunes. It is absolutely amazing. I love working on that podcast. It's kind of my baby. Me and the host created that podcast together about 3 years ago. And we have well over 160 episodes that you can listen to where we talk to astronauts in space, out of space. We did the first ever podcast live from space. That's put up on our YouTube channel. We had bands on there, like the band Styx. They came and spoke with astronauts and talking about working in confined spaces together and mental health. And so it's a great medium to get to know astronauts and scientists and things that's going on at NASA, but on a more personal level, you get to know them as the humans that they actually are. So, and outside of me doing the podcast, doing live TV, doing field recordings, I also do archiving of the old Apollo tapes or the old Gemini mission tapes or the early space station audio tapes. So I have to actually use an audio oven. Anyone who's familiar with audio tapes knows what I'm talking about, and bake the tapes and put it into the oven to where for maybe like a very, very low heat for about 2 weeks, so I can be able to pull that audio off the tape without the tape breaking, because it's so fragile if it hasn't been stored properly. So I'm able to pull that audio off the tape and digitize it. And that goes to United States' National Archives so people can listen to it. We also put it up on archive.org, so you can literally go listen to old Apollo missions and old Gemini missions and hear the actual space-to-ground audio, hear the astronauts speaking, hear mission control talking to them, and even daily conversations. Now we do something similar to that with the audio that's coming from them. We do daily space to ground audio recordings. And basically, when I say space to ground, I'm talking about the audio coming from space and down to the ground, and the audio coming from the ground and going back up to space. That's their way of communicating. It's kind of like a walkie-talkie, right? And so I digitized that audio. I download it and put it up on archive.org daily. So that way, if there was a spacewalk yesterday and you missed part of it and you wanted to go back and listen, if you don't feel like watching it and you just want to listen to the old audio files and you want to use them in something of your work, you can go on archive.org and just pull off those files from yesterday's mission. And there you go. You have it right there in your home. It's quite interesting, the different things that you have to do as an audio engineer at NASA. A lot of people they're audio engineers in music, where they are a mixing audio engineer, or they're, a recording engineer. And then you have the audio engineers that work in TV and in film, where they're just either broadcasting out on TV or they're doing audio post mixing and mastering. Well, in my role and at NASA, you need to be able to do all of those things. So it is very, very, very awesome to do it.